The communications array on the orbital station above New Geneva had gone silent 3 weeks ago. At first, the Terran Council thought it was just a technical problem. Equipment failed sometimes, even with the best maintenance. They sent messages, asking for status updates. They waited for replies that never came. When 2 more days passed without any signal, not even an emergency beacon, they knew something was terribly wrong. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the TSS Vigilant as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Geneva system. She was a tall woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, her uniform crisp despite the long journey. She had been to New Geneva twice before. It was a beautiful world, with blue oceans and green continents, home to 2.3 billion people, families, children, dreams. The sensor operator's hands shook as he read the displays. "Commander, I'm not picking up any broadcasts, no traffic control, no civilian channels. Nothing." Elena felt her stomach, turned to ice. "What about the orbital stations?" "Gone, ma'am. Debris fields where they used to be." The Vigilant moved deeper into the system. The crew worked in terrible silence. Everyone knew what silence meant in space. Space was never truly quiet when people were around. There were always signals, always chatter, always life. This silence was the silence of death. When New Geneva appeared on the main screen, several crew members gasped. Others looked away. Elena forced herself to watch. The world that had been blue and green was now brown and black. Massive fires burned across entire continents. The oceans were still there, but they looked wrong, darker, with steam rising from the surface. The atmosphere was thick with ash. "Take us into orbit," Elena said quietly. "Launch all reconnaissance drones. I want to know what happened here." The drones went down through the poisoned atmosphere. The cameras showed cities that had been turned to glass. Melted buildings stood like twisted sculptures. Roads had been vaporized. There were no bodies. The heat had been so intense that everything organic had simply ceased to exist. In some areas, the ground itself had been turned into a smooth, glassy surface that reflected the burning sky. The weapons officer reviewed the data with growing horror. "Commander, these are orbital bombardment patterns. Plasma weapons, maybe fusion bombs. Whoever did this, they hit every major city within the first hour, then they came back and hit the smaller towns. And then they hit everything else." "How long ago?" 3 weeks, ma'am. Right when we lost contact." Elena closed her eyes for a moment. 3 weeks. While the Terran Council had been waiting and hoping and wondering, every single person on this world had already been dead. She opened her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "Keep searching. There must be something, a shelter, an underground facility. Somebody had to survive." But nobody had survived. The attack had been thorough, systematic, professional. This was not a war. This was extermination. 2 days into the search, they found the black box from the planetary defense headquarters. It had been buried under rubble, its armored casing scarred but intact. The technical team extracted the data and brought it to Elena in the operations room. "You need to see this, ma'am," the technician said. His face was pale. The recording started 3 weeks ago. The defense coordinator's voice was calm at first, professional. "Unknown vessels entering system. 37 contacts. They're not responding to hails. Weapon signatures detected. This is not a drill. All defense platforms going to full alert." Then, the attacks began. The orbital stations died first, blown apart before they could even charge their weapons. The defense coordinator's voice became urgent. "They're targeting population centers. All cities under bombardment. Evacuation protocols are—" The transmission broke up into static, then came back. "Reporting successful hits. Estimate civilian. Casualties in the millions already. They're not even trying to take territory. They're just killing us." The recording continued for another hour, becoming more desperate as the attacks intensified. Elena heard the defense coordinator crying, then angry, then simply tired. Finally, near the end, a different voice came through. Young, a child, maybe 10 years old. "Is anyone out there? Please, Somebody answer. My mom and dad aren't moving. The shelter is getting hot. I can hear the explosions. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm from New Geneva. If anyone finds this, please remember us. Please remember we were here. Then nothing. The black box recorded another 70 hours of silence before its power finally died. Elena played the message 3 more times. Sarah Chen, 10 years old. The technician standing beside her was crying openly now. Elena wanted to cry too, but she could not. Not yet. She had work to do. Copy all of this data, she said. Every second of the recording. The council needs to see everything. The investigation continued for another week. They found evidence of biological weapons dropped after the bombardment. They found traces of chemical agents designed to poison the soil for generations. They found targeting data that showed the attackers had maps of every human settlement, down to the smallest farming community. This had been planned, calculated, efficient. The reconnaissance drones finally identified debris from the attacking ships. The computer analyzed the wreckage and found matches in the database, the Kethvan Concordat. A powerful alien empire located 300 light-years from Earth. Humanity had made contact with them 15 years ago. The diplomatic meetings had been cold, but professional. The Kethvan had made it clear they did not like humans expanding through space, but there had been no threats, no warnings of violence. Until now. Elena sat in her quarters on the final night before they left the New Geneva system. She held a datapad showing the picture of Sarah Chen she had found in the colony records. A smiling little girl with dark hair and bright eyes. Gone now, turned to ash with 2.3 billion others. The door chimed. Her executive officer entered. Commander, we've completed the final survey. Every analysis confirms the same conclusion. Total extinction event. No survivors. Prepare the ship for departure, Elena said. We're going home. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks. Elena spent most of that time writing her report. She chose every word carefully. The Terran Council needed to understand what had happened. Here, they needed to feel it. When the Vigilant arrived at Earth, the Council was already in emergency session. Elena presented her findings in person, standing before the representatives of all 47 human worlds. She showed them the recordings. She played Sarah Chen's final message. She displayed the images of the dead world. The council chamber was absolutely silent when she finished. Then, one by one, the representatives stood. They stood for Sarah Chen. They stood for New Geneva. They stood for 2.3 billion murdered souls. The vote came 3 hours later. It was unanimous. For the first time in 200 years of space exploration, humanity voted for total war. Admiral James Chen was given complete authority to build a military force that would bring justice to the Kethvan Concordat. As Elena left the council building, she looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, the Kethvan thought they had won. They thought they had frightened humanity into submission. They had no idea what was coming. Humanity had been tested before, and every time they had risen to the challenge. The Kethvan had made a fatal mistake. They had made it personal. 6 months after New Geneva died, humanity transformed. Every world in Terran space became part of the war effort. Factories that once built civilian ships now produced warships. Mining operations that once worked 8-hour shifts now ran around the clock. Scientists who had spent their careers researching peaceful technologies now unlocked weapons that had existed only in theory. Admiral James Chen stood in the command center of Luna Station, watching the construction feeds from shipyards across human space. He was 60 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. He had fought in the frontier wars 40 years ago, back when humanity's enemies were pirates and corporate raiders. This was different. This was war on a scale he had never imagined. Status report, he said to his chief of staff. Captain Marcus Webb consulted his datapad. Construction is ahead of schedule on all fronts, sir. We now have 400 operational warships, with another 400 in various stages of completion. The Retribution fleet will be ready to launch in 3 months. What about the new weapons systems? The Singularity torpedoes passed their final test yesterday. The nano-disassembler weapons are still experimental, but the scientists think they'll be ready before we launch, and the AI warfare systems are already being installed on the lead ships. Chen nodded slowly. Singularity torpedoes. Weapons that created tiny black holes that would tear enemy ships apart. Nano-disassemblers that would break down enemy vessels at the molecular level. AI systems that could react and adapt faster than any living pilot. These were weapons humanity had discussed for decades but never built. They were too dangerous, too terrible. Until now. Any word from the Kethvan? Chen asked. Webb's expression hardened. Yes, sir. They sent another message this morning. He played the recording. The alien voice was translated by the computer flat and emotionless. Humans of Terra. One world was a warning. Your expansion into sacred space is unacceptable. Retreat to your core systems or face the same fate as New Geneva. You have 30 days to comply. Chen listened to the message twice. Then he smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Send them our response. The response had been prepared weeks ago, approved by the Terran Council. Webb played it back. Chen's own voice filled the command center. To the Kethvan Concordat. You taught us what extinction looks like. We're returning the lesson. See you soon. Across human space, millions of people volunteered for military service. Many of them were refugees from New Geneva who had been off-world when the attack happened. They had lost families, children, friends. They wanted revenge, and humanity was prepared to give it to them. Elena Vasquez was now a captain, commanding the destroyer TSS Vengeance. She spent her days training her crew, pushing them hard, making sure they understood what they would face. The Kethvan were not amateurs. They had destroyed 30 other species over the past 1,000 years. They had weapons and tactics that humanity had never encountered. But humanity had something the Kethvan did not understand. Humanity adapted. When faced with the impossible, humans found a way. When knocked down, humans got back up. When told something could not be done, humans did it anyway. The training was brutal. Crews practiced battle scenarios 20 hours a day. They learned to operate their ships when half the systems were destroyed. They learned to keep fighting when wounded. They learned to never, ever give up. One afternoon, Elena received an unexpected visitor. His name was Shalthar, and he was Kethvan. He had defected to humanity 3 months ago, claiming he disagreed with his government's policies. Most humans wanted to kill him on sight. Elena had requested his assignment to her ship. Captain Vasquez, Shalthar said, standing in her office. He was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and large black eyes. I understand you wish to speak with me. Sit down, Elena said. She studied the alien carefully. I want to understand your people, how they think, how they fight, why they did what they did to New Geneva. Shalthar sat, his movements graceful despite his awkward frame. My people believe this section of space is sacred. Ancient texts say the gods once walked here. When humans began building colonies in this region, the Concordat leadership decided you must be stopped. So they murdered 2.3 billion people. Yes. Shalthar's voice was quiet. It was meant to terrify you, to make you run. The Concordat has used this tactic 30 times before. It has always worked. It won't work this time, Elena said. I know. That is why I am here. Captain, you must understand what you are facing. The Kethvan military has thousands of ships. They have weapons that can destroy suns. They have conquered species far more advanced than humanity. Many of your people believe this will be a quick war. It will not be. Many humans will die. Elena leaned forward. How many humans died on New Geneva? 2.3 billion. Then we're already behind. We'll catch up. The months passed quickly. The shipyards worked at a pace that seemed impossible. Engineers pushed their equipment beyond safe limits. Welders worked until they collapsed from exhaustion, then got up and worked some more. Everyone understood what was at stake. This was not just about revenge, this was about survival. If humanity did not show the Kethvan that New Geneva was a mistake, then more worlds would die. Admiral Chen barely slept. He spent his days coordinating the war effort and his nights reviewing battle plans. He knew the first engagement would be critical. If the Retribution fleet won, the Kethvan would take humanity seriously. If they lost, Earth itself might be the next target. Finally, 9 months after New Geneva fell silent, the Retribution fleet was ready. 847 warships, the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. The flagship was called New Geneva's Dawn, a massive battleship bristling with weapons. Admiral Chen would command from her bridge. The launch ceremony was brief. No speeches, no celebrations, just a moment of silence for the dead, followed by a single message broadcast to every ship in the fleet. Remember New Geneva. Make them pay. The fleet formed up in high orbit above Earth. 847 ships, each one crewed by men and women who had volunteered to face death. Some would not come home. Everyone knew this. Nobody cared. They had a job to do. Admiral Chen sat in his command chair aboard New Geneva's Dawn and gave the order. All ships, prepare for faster-than-light jump. Destination, the Scorpio Reach. Let's go introduce ourselves to the Kethvan. The fleet jumped. Space twisted around them as they entered the faster-than-light corridor. The journey would take 3 days. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to think about what was coming. 3 days to remember why they were doing this. In her quarters aboard the Vengeance, Elena looked at the picture of Sarah Chen one more time. The little girl was smiling. Elena promised silently that the smile would be avenged. The Kethvan had wanted to test humanity. They were about to get their answer. The Retribution fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 847 ships appeared simultaneously at the edge of the Scorpio Reach, a cluster of 6 star systems that served as the Kethvan forward operating bases. The Kethvan had 300 ships stationed there. They had 30 seconds to realize what was happening before the humans opened fire. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display from his command chair. The Kethvan ships were scattered across the system, most of them in low-power mode. They had not expected an attack. Why would they? As far as they knew, humans were supposed to be cowering in fear, preparing to abandon their colonies. All ships, Chen said calmly. Execute Protocol New Geneva. The human fleet attacked. Singularity torpedoes crossed the space between the fleets, each one carrying a miniature black hole contained in a magnetic field. When they hit Kethvan ships, the fields collapsed and the black holes activated for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough. The alien ships were torn apart from the inside, metal and bodies pulled into infinite density before the black holes evaporated. The Kethvan tried to respond. They were good fighters, well-trained and experienced, but they had never faced an enemy like this. The human ships moved with precision that seemed impossible. Every vessel knew exactly where every other vessel was. They covered each other perfectly, never leaving an opening. The AI warfare systems adapted to Kethvan tactics in real time, learning and countering faster than the aliens could adjust. Elena commanded the Vengeance with cold efficiency. Her ship was part of a squadron hunting down Kethvan cruisers trying to flee the battle. The cruisers were fast, but the human destroyers were faster. They chased their targets through the debris fields, firing nano-disassembler missiles that broke the enemy ships down molecule by molecule. Captain, enemy vessel is trying to jump away, her tactical officer reported. Disable their engines, Elena ordered. We want that ship intact. The Vengeance fired a precise burst that shattered the Kethvan cruiser's drive systems. The alien ship went dead in space. Elena ordered a boarding team prepared. They needed prisoners. They needed information. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, not a single Kethvan ship remained operational. The human fleet had lost 42 vessels, but they had destroyed or captured every enemy unit in the system. Protocol New Geneva was clear. No mercy during combat. Complete destruction of military assets. 0 prisoners unless specifically ordered otherwise. Admiral Chen surveyed the aftermath on his tactical display. The Scorpio Reach was humanity's now. He activated the fleet-wide channel. All ships, excellent work. Begin search and rescue operations for our damaged vessels. Then we moved to the next system. The Kethvan have 6 bases here. We're taking all of them. Over the next week, the human fleet moved through the Scorpio Reach like a scythe through wheat. The Kethvan tried to mount a defense at the 3rd system. They had gathered reinforcements, nearly 500 ships. The humans destroyed them in 8 hours. The Kethvan tried to ambush the fleet at the 5th system. The human AI systems detected the trap before the fleet even arrived, and Chen simply changed his approach vector. The ambush became a slaughter. Elena led the boarding action on the captured Kethvan cruiser. Her team moved through the alien ship in full combat armor, weapons ready. They found the bridge and secured it quickly. The Kethvan admiral was still alive, wounded but conscious. The alien looked up at Elena with its large black eyes. Blood seeped from a cut on its head. "You cannot win," it said in broken English. "The Concordat will send 1,000 ships. 10,000. You are just one small species. We have crushed 30 civilizations. You will be the 31st. Elena knelt down to look the admiral in the eye. "Why did you attack New Geneva?" "It was a test, to see if you were a threat." "And what did you learn?" The admiral's expression, alien as it was, conveyed something like grim satisfaction. "That we should have sent more ships." Elena stood up. "You're right about one thing. You should have. Take him to the brig. Admiral Chen wants to speak with all prisoners personally." When Chen interviewed the Kethvan admiral 2 days later, the conversation was short. The admiral explained the Concordat's reasoning. New Geneva had been a test. If humans retreated, they would be seen as weak and eventually enslaved. If humans fought back with conventional forces, they would be destroyed slowly. The Kethvan had not expected this response. Total war, no negotiations, no mercy. "You have made a grave mistake," the admiral said. "Even if you win here, the Concordat will never stop. They will hunt your species across the galaxy." Chen nodded slowly. "Then we'll make sure there's no Concordat left to hunt us. Broadcast the following message on all Kethvan frequencies." The message went out across the Scorpio Reach. It was simple. You wanted to know if humanity was a threat. You have your answer. We're coming for your worlds next. Surrender or share New Geneva's fate. The response came 3 hours later. The Kethvan Concordat deployed their ultimate weapon. It was called the Gene Lock, a device that targeted specific DNA sequences. They had used it twice before to wipe out species that refused to surrender. Now they activated it against humanity. The weapon worked. Across the fleet, crew members suddenly collapsed. Their bodies shut down at the cellular level, killed by a weapon designed specifically to target human DNA. 40,000 people died in seconds. Entire ships went dark as their crews died at their posts. Admiral Chen felt the weapon's effect. His chest tightened. His vision blurred. He was dying. Around him on the bridge, crew members were already dead or dying. This was the end. The Kethvan had won after all, but then something strange happened. Chen's vision cleared. His chest stopped hurting. He looked around the bridge in confusion. Some crew members were standing back up. Not all of them. Maybe 1 in 10, but they were alive. "Medical emergency," he gasped into his communicator. "All stations report status." The reports came in slowly. 40,000 dead across the fleet, but many others had survived. The doctors worked frantically to understand what had happened. Finally, after 2 hours of desperate research, they found the answer. Human DNA was more variable than the Kethvan had realized. The gene lock weapon worked on most humans, but not all. Random mutations, natural variations, and simple genetic diversity meant that about 15% of the human fleet had DNA different enough to survive the attack. And then the doctors did something remarkable. They analyzed the DNA of the survivors and created a gene therapy treatment. It was risky. It would hurt, but it would make humans immune to the gene lock weapon. The treatment could be administered in 30 minutes. "All ships," Chen ordered, his voice steady despite the horror of what had just happened. "Begin immediate gene therapy treatments for all surviving personnel. We're not retreating. We're not stopping. They wanted to kill us with our own biology. We're adapting. That's what humans do." Over the next 12 hours, every surviving crew member underwent the treatment. They screamed. They suffered. Some died from the treatment itself, but most lived. And when it was done, they were immune to the Kethvan's ultimate weapon. The fleet pressed forward. They hit the 6th and final Kethvan base in the Scorpio Reach with everything they had. The base was heavily fortified, protected by defensive platforms and minefields. Chen did not care. He sent wave after wave of ships against the defenses. Human ships died, but the base died too. When the Scorpio Reach finally fell, Admiral Chen broadcast one more message to the Kethvan. You tried to kill us with a genetic weapon. We adapted in 12 hours. You wanted to test if humans were a threat. Let me make this clear. We're not a threat. We're a promise that New Geneva will be avenged. Run if you want. We'll find you anyway. The Kethvan Concordat leadership watched the message in their council chamber. For the first time in 1,000 years, they felt something they had never felt before. They felt fear. 3 months after the Scorpio Reach fell, the Terran Armada had destroyed 12 Kethvan star systems. The fleet moved through space like an unstoppable force, crushing every military installation they found. The Kethvan tried to stop them. They sent battle groups, deployed new weapons, even attempted diplomatic negotiations. Nothing worked. The humans just kept coming. Admiral Chen stood in the war room aboard New Geneva's Dawn, studying star maps. Red markers showed Kethvan territory. Blue markers showed human-controlled space. In the past 3 months, a lot of red had turned to blue, but there was still a long way to go. Kethvan Prime, the Concordat's homeworld, was 200 light-years away. The fleet had covered less than half that distance. Admiral, incoming transmission from the Kethvan Concordat, the communications officer said. They're asking for a ceasefire and peace negotiations. Chen looked at the officer. Tell them no. Sir, the Terran Council is also requesting that we consider negotiations. They say we've made our point. We can discuss terms now. Chen felt anger rise in his chest. He took a breath and forced himself to remain calm. Connect me to the Council. I want to speak to them directly. The connection took a few minutes to establish. When the Council appeared on the screen, Chen did not wait for them to speak. I understand you want me to negotiate with the Kethvan. The Council speaker nodded. Admiral, you've done excellent work. The Kethvan are ready to discuss reparations. They'll recognize our territory. They'll pay compensation for New Geneva. We can end this war now. Show me Sarah Chen, Chen said quietly. I'm sorry? Show me Sarah Chen, the 10-year-old girl who died on New Geneva. Bring her back to life and I'll negotiate. Until then, the fleet continues to Kethvan Prime. The council speaker looked uncomfortable. Admiral, we understand your feelings, but do you? Chen interrupted. Because I don't think you do. 2.3 billion people were murdered. The Kethvan did it to test us, to see if we would run, and now that we're winning, you want to negotiate? What message does that send? That if you kill enough humans, we'll eventually forgive you? No, the fleet moves forward. They will face justice or they will join their victims. The connection ended. Chen knew he was close to insubordination, but he did not care. The council was safe on Earth. They had not seen New Geneva's burned cities. They had not listened to Sarah Chen's final message. They had not watched 40,000 crew members die from the gene-lock weapon. Chen had seen all of it. He would not stop until the job was finished. Captain Elena Vasquez felt the same way. The Vengeance had been in the thick of every battle. Her ship bore the scars of combat, hull breaches that had been repaired, weapon systems that had been replaced, crew members who had been buried in space. But the Vengeance kept fighting, and so did Elena. One afternoon, her ship encountered something unexpected. A distress beacon from a planet in a system the Kethvan controlled. Elena brought the Vengeance in carefully, weapons ready for a trap. What she found instead was a surprise. The planet was home to a species called the Moranth. They were small reptilian creatures with green scales and intelligent eyes. The Kethvan had conquered them 200 years ago and enslaved their entire population. When the Moranth leaders learned that humans were fighting the Concordat, they had rebelled and called for help. Elena met with the Moranth council leader in a small building that had once been a Kethvan administrative center. The leader, whose name was Shisk, looked at Elena with a mixture of hope and fear. Are you truly fighting the Concordat? Shisk asked. We have heard rumors, but we did not believe them. No one has ever successfully resisted the Kethvan. We're not just resisting, Elena said. We're winning. What do you need? Freedom. The Kethvan garrison fled when your ships arrived. But they will come back. They always come back. Can you protect us? Elena considered the question. The Moranth were not her mission. Her mission was to destroy Kethvan military assets. But as she looked at Shisk and saw the hope in his eyes, she made a decision. We can do better than protect you. We can give you weapons and help you defend yourselves, and if you want, you can join us. Fight alongside us. Help us destroy the Concordat. Shisk stood up straighter. You would trust us? Let us fight with you? The Kethvan hurt you too. You deserve justice as much as we do. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena worked with the Miranth to establish their defense systems. She also sent a message to Admiral Chen, recommending that the fleet begin liberating other enslaved species. Chen agreed immediately. The strategy made sense. Every species the Kethvan had conquered was a potential ally. Every freed world was one more asset against the Concordat. The Armada's mission changed slightly. They still destroyed Kethvan military forces, but now they also stopped to liberate conquered worlds. The Miranth joined the fight, contributing 50 small but fast warships. A species called the Torlani provided intelligence about Kethvan fleet movements. The Zeph, a race of insectoid engineers, helped repair damaged human ships using techniques the Concordat had forced them to learn. The alliance grew. Within 2 months, 12 different species were fighting alongside humanity. The fleet was no longer just human. It was a coalition of the Kethvan's victims, all united by their desire for justice. Shalthar, the Kethvan defector, proved invaluable. He helped Elena understand Kethvan military doctrine. He explained their cultural weaknesses. Most importantly, he helped the humans understand that not all Kethvan supported the Concordat's policies. Many ordinary Kethvan citizens were horrified by what their government had done. Some were even helping resistance movements. The Concordat leadership is beginning to fracture, Shalthar explained one evening in Elena's office. Some want to negotiate peace. Others want to fight to the last ship. And a few are preparing to flee to distant space and abandon the Empire entirely. What do your people think about us? Elena asked. The ordinary citizens, I mean. Shalthar was quiet for a moment. They are terrified. The Concordat told them humans were primitive and weak. Now they see human ships destroying everything the Concordat sends against them. They see enslaved species rising up. They see their mighty empire crumbling. Many believe the humans will exterminate the Kethvan species entirely. Will we? Elena asked softly. I do not know. Will you? Elena thought about Sarah Chen, about New Geneva, about 2.3 billion people who would never see another sunrise. That depends on your leaders. If they surrender and face justice, we'll show mercy. If they keep fighting, then... She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The fleet pressed on. Month after month, system after system. The Kethvan threw everything they had against the advancing Armada. They deployed weapons that warped space itself. They used tactics that had defeated 30 other species. Nothing worked. The humans adapted to every challenge. And behind the humans came the liberated species, each one adding their strength to the cause. Admiral Chen became more isolated as the campaign continued. He rarely left the bridge. He barely slept. His staff worried about him, but no one dared to suggest he rest. Everyone knew what drove him. The ghosts of New Geneva, the promise he had made to the dead. Finally, after 6 months of fighting, the fleet reached the outer defense network of Kethvan Prime. The homeworld of the Concordat was ahead. The final battle was coming. Every ship in the fleet prepared for the largest engagement of the war. They had fought for so long, lost so many, but they were almost at the end. Admiral Chen recorded a message to send to the Kethvan Concordat leadership. This is Admiral James Chen of the Terran Armada. You destroyed New Geneva. You murdered 2.3 billion people. You did it as a test. Now it's time for the final exam. We're here. Face us with honor, or we'll drag you out of your palaces and make you watch as your empire burns. Either way, justice is coming. There's nowhere left to run. The message transmitted. The fleet waited, and the Kethvan prepared their last defense. The Battle of Kethvan Prime began on a Thursday morning, Earth Standard Time. The largest fleet battle in galactic history started when the Terran Armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system and found themselves facing 4,000 Kethvan warships. The Concordat had gathered every vessel they had left. This was their final stand. Admiral Chen looked at the tactical display and felt no fear, only a grim determination. All ships battle formation. Today we end this war. For New Geneva. Across the fleet, 800 human ships moved into position. Alongside them flew vessels from 12 liberated species. The Miranth, the Torlani, the Zeph, all of them united against their former masters. The combined fleet numbered just over 1,000 ships. They were outnumbered 4-1. Chen did not care. They had been outnumbered before. The Kethvan attacked first. Their ships surged forward in a massive wave, firing weapons that tore holes in space itself. Reality warped around the human fleet. Ships were pulled into dimensional rifts. Others simply ceased to exist, erased from the universe by weapons that manipulated the fundamental forces of physics. The human fleet responded with everything they had. Singularity torpedoes created deadly barriers of gravitational distortion. Nano-disassembler weapons broke down enemy vessels at the molecular level. The AI warfare systems coordinated attacks with precision that bordered on prescience. Every human ship fought like it was the last ship in the universe. Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the Vengeance through the chaos. Her ship had survived every battle of the war. Today would be no different. She hunted Kethvan capital ships with cold efficiency, directing her weapons teams to target critical systems. Bridge, engines, weapons. Every shot counted. Every kill brought them closer to victory. "Captain, we've got 3 cruisers targeting us," her tactical officer shouted over the sound of alarms. "Evasive pattern Delta. Return fire on the lead ship. Tell the Moranth squadron to hit the other 2. The battle raged for hours. The space around Kethvan Prime became a graveyard of shattered ships and broken dreams. Human vessels died. Alien allies fell. But the Kethvan died faster. Their formations broke apart under the relentless human assault. Their ships, designed for conquering weaker species, could not stand against an enemy that refused to break. On the second day of the battle, the Kethvan deployed their final secret weapon. A massive orbital platform that fired a beam of pure energy, capable of destroying entire planets. They aimed it at the human fleet. The weapon charged, reality itself seeming to shrink away from its power. Admiral Chen saw the weapon on his tactical display. He had seconds to react. All ships, maximum power to shields. Brace for impact. The weapon fired. The beam cut through space like the finger of an angry god. It hit the human fleet dead center. 20 ships simply vaporized. Another 30 were crippled beyond repair. The beam continued past the fleet and into the emptiness beyond, a scar across space that would take years to fade. But the human fleet did not break. Chen's voice cut through the chaos. "All remaining ships target that platform. I want it destroyed now." 100 human ships turned their weapons on the platform. Singularity torpedoes, nano-disassemblers, conventional missiles, everything they had. The platform's shields held for 10 seconds. Then they failed. The platform broke apart in a flash of light that briefly outshone Kethvan Prime's sun. The battle entered its 3rd day. The Kethvan fleet was down to 1,000 ships. The human fleet had 400 left. The allied species had lost half their vessels. Everyone was exhausted. Everyone was wounded. But nobody stopped fighting. Elena led a desperate strike against the Kethvan command station, a massive structure orbiting Kethvan Prime. If they could destroy it, the enemy fleet would lose coordination. It was a suicide mission. Elena did not hesitate. She took 6 ships and attacked. The station was protected by defensive platforms and minefields. Elena's small squadron flew through hell itself. 2 ships died in the first minute. Another was crippled and forced to retreat. That left Elena and 3 others. They pressed on, firing at the station's weak points, dodging defensive fire that could have destroyed moons. The Vengeance took a direct hit to the starboard side. Half the ship's systems went offline. Elena felt the deck shudder under her feet. "Damage report. Engines at 30%. Shields down. Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. Keep firing. We're not leaving until that station is dead." The remaining ships poured everything they had into the station. Slowly, impossibly, the massive structure began to break apart. Explosions rippled across its hull. Internal systems failed. And then, with a flash that lit up the entire battlefield, the command station exploded. The Kethvan fleet fell into chaos. Without central coordination, their ships became confused. Human vessels pressed the advantage, hunting down enemy ships with ruthless efficiency. The 3rd day ended with the Kethvan fleet in ruins. On the 4th day, a transmission came from Kethvan Prime. The Concordat High Command was ready to surrender. Total surrender. They would face trial for their crimes. They would pay reparations. They would dismantle their military. Anything to stop the killing. Admiral Chen sat in his command chair listening to the surrender offer. Around him, the bridge crew waited. Everyone knew this was the moment that mattered, the choice that would define humanity's future. Chen thought about New Geneva, about Sarah Chen's final message, about 2.3 billion dead. He thought about the 40,000 crew members killed by the gene lock weapon, about all the ships lost in battle, about the price humanity had paid for justice. He also thought about the Moranth, the Torlani, the Zeph, all the species that had joined humanity's cause. They were watching now, waiting to see what humans would do with absolute victory. Would humanity become like the Kethvan? Would they exterminate their enemies? Or would they show that there was a better way? Chen opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships cease fire. The Kethvan have surrendered. We've won. Then he opened a channel to the Kethvan High Command. Your surrender is accepted. Your leaders will stand trial. The families of New Geneva's victims will see justice done. Your military will be disbanded. Your empire is over, but your species will survive. We're not like you. We don't exterminate entire populations. We remember New Geneva not by becoming monsters, but by being better than you ever were. The battle ended. The Kethvan fleet powered down its weapons. The war was over. The trials took 6 months. The Kethvan leaders who had ordered the attack on New Geneva faced the families of the victims. They listened to testimony from survivors. They saw the recordings of the dying world. Some showed remorse. Others remained defiant to the end. All of them faced justice. The Kethvan Concordat was dissolved. Its member species were freed to govern themselves. The empire that had existed for 1,000 years ended not with glory, but with the quiet reading of verdicts in a courtroom. Admiral Chen retired after the trials. He was 62 years old and looked 20 years older. The war had taken everything from him, but he had kept his promise. New Geneva had been avenged. Captain Elena Vasquez was offered command of Earth's defense fleet. She turned it down. Instead, she requested command of the New Geneva Memorial Station, a facility built in orbit around the dead world. The station's purpose was simple: to remember. 2.3 billion names were engraved in light on its outer hull, visible from space. Every person who had died was remembered. The galaxy had learned something from the war. They learned that humanity would defend its own with absolute determination. They learned that humans could be the best allies or the worst enemies. Most importantly, they learned that humans understood the difference between justice and vengeance. 5 years after the war ended, a small ceremony was held at the memorial station. Survivors from New Geneva who had been off-world during the attack gathered to remember their lost families. Among them was a young Kethvan named Thalshir, the daughter of Shalthar. She had never known the old empire. She had grown up in a galaxy where Kethvan and humans worked together to build something better. Elena watched as Thalshir and a human child named Michael placed flowers at the memorial wall. Their parents stood behind them, former enemies who had learned to coexist. It was not perfect. There was still pain, still anger, but there was also hope. Elena thought about Sarah Chen, about the little girl's final message. Please remember we were here. They had remembered. They had avenged, and now they were building something better on the foundation of that memory. The Terran Armada had ascended in fire, forged by grief into something terrible and beautiful. They had shown the galaxy what humanity truly was, a species that would go to any length to protect its own, but would choose mercy when victory was won. They had proven that humans were dangerous not because they were cruel, but because they knew when to fight and when to forgive. The memorial station floated silently in orbit around New Geneva. The names glowed in the darkness. 2.3 billion lights, 2.3 billion souls, all remembered, all avenged, all at peace. And in the distance, human ships patrolled the stars, ensuring that what happened to New Geneva would never happen again. The galaxy had tested humanity. Humanity had answered, and the answer was clear. Humans were neither the strongest nor the oldest species in the galaxy, but they were the ones who remembered their dead, honored their promises, and built their future on the foundation of both justice and mercy. The war was over. The peace had begun, and humanity stood ready to face whatever came next.